in Orissa today, I don't know if any of you are from Orissa. Is anyone from Orissa? No? Okay. In Orissa today, that popular image of Kali standing on Shiva with her tongue slightly out, where it looks like she's biting her tongue, again, in kind of the tantric sphere of Kali worship, this is like the most empowered image of Kali that you can imagine, right? And it's just a wonderfully empowering image for women in general. But what have people in Orissa done with this image is that they have, through a course of kind of manipulation of texts, produced an interpretation of that image as suggesting that it is Kali biting her tongue in shame, in lajja, for stepping on her husband Shiva. So let me just briefly, without kind of boring you with too many details, let me just briefly kind of walk you through how this happened, because I think it's really fascinating how we can go from this very empowering image that is so well known to this entirely different interpretation. And this happens through the whole story of the killing of this demon Mahisha from the Devi Mahatmya that I was speaking about with Durga. Right? So in the Devi Mahatmya, the gods produce Durga, the goddess, in order to defeat the demon Mahisha. As I said, the goddess is decked out with all of their powers and with their weapons, and she easily decapitates the buffalo demon Mahisha. So that's in the Devi Mahatmya, around 600 CE. Okay? Now in the Devi Bhagavata Purana, which is from dates somewhere between the 6th and 14th centuries, this story develops. And Mahisha, in this story, obtains a boon from Brahma to become invulnerable to death, except for at the hands of a female. Okay? So now there's a condition upon his invincibility. So he needs to be killed by a female specifically. So the gods create the goddess. Mahisha becomes enamored with her. But she rebuffs his advances. She wants nothing to do with him. This is where her seductive appearance comes into play. Mahisha then attacks the goddess, and she decapitates him. Okay. Now, in the Chandi Purana, which is an Aurelian text from about the 15th century, the story develops again. So now Mahisha receives a boon that he can be killed only by a naked female. Not just a female, but by a naked female. So the goddess has to strip naked. The goddess then becomes enraged at this humiliation that she must suffer, right? She's pissed. Why do I have to strip naked in order to kill this demon? And who's creating these requirements of me? So she goes on a rampage, right? And she's just indiscriminately destroying anything that she encounters. Now Shiva worships the goddess and accepts her as his particular deity, right? And it's this worship by Shiva that calms her. And she's wooed by his wonderful dancing, as you can imagine, right? And so the goddess offers Shiva a boon, and he asks her to become his wife. She accepts, and thus she's prevented from destroying the whole world. Okay, so that's the story in the Chandini Purana. Now, in the contemporary Oriya story, it presupposes the marital union between Shiva and the goddess. And in order to stop her rampage and to keep her from destroying the whole world, he lies down on the ground in front of the goddess while she's absorbed in this dance of destruction. Again, we can kind of imagine what that might look like. The goddess accidentally steps on Shiva, and she bites her tongue in shame for having stepped on her husband. So it's very interesting, right, to see how from this very ancient text, 6th century, we have this very powerful image of the goddess on the battlefield, doing her thing, being fierce, being independent, so on and so forth, to this contemporary story that uses that same image to represent a very different aspect of femininity and of the goddess, right? And suggesting that that's not an image that we can use to empower ourselves, but it's an image to reinforce the idea of lajja, of shame, of embarrassment, that is so prevalent in Hindu culture, right? And as a means of kind of maintaining social order and you know, kind of orthodox Brahminical relations between men and women, in which the man, the husband, has a dominant position. So lastly, I just want to kind of tie up here with the idea of uncategorizable, is that a word? Goddesses who fall neither in those categories, who are neither the benign consort goddesses and who are neither the fierce virgin goddesses. And for these, I have two different examples who share a lot of similarities. One is Santoshi Ma. Who's here familiar with Santoshi Ma? Raise your hand. Right, you guys have heard of her. And the other is a goddess named Swasthani, who I'm guessing no one has heard of. If you have, raise your hand. Bowl me over. Okay. She's a very local Nepali deity. But the two of them are both unmarried goddesses, but they're generally benevolent. But they can also lash out and give punishment to people who upset them, who anger them, who fail to worship them properly. Okay, and with unmarried goddesses, right? Usually they're more fierce, and the married goddesses are going to be the benevolent ones. So here we have a little bit of tension there. And in their iconography, both of these generally benevolent goddesses, albeit unmarried, are shown holding swords and shields and tridents and other imagery, other emblems associated with the warrior goddesses. But yet they are not, in fact, warrior goddesses. So neither one of them either has a history or a mythology to tell us more about them, that associates them with a male deity of any sort, or even gives us an idea of where they've come from and how it is that they have, made their ways into the popular imagination. They are of two very different time periods. However, Santoshi Ma is a very contemporary. She kind of appears out of nowhere in the 1960s. Swasthani dates back to the 16th century, but is still very much part of living culture in Nepal today. So in any case, what I wanted to kind of illustrate for you today are the way in which there are these popular kind of easy categories that we can fit goddesses into, but there are also goddesses who don't fit into those categories, and even the goddesses who do seem to fit in those categories cannot be so easily distilled down into these basic prototypes, but are much more complicated. And I think all of this speaks to how men and women in Hindu cultures can use these images and understand them as a way of understanding their own places and roles in society, and to try and make sense of them. So I'll leave it at that. I'm more than happy to answer any questions about anything that I've said now, or about anything related to Hinduism more generally, or in the Himalayan region. And again, if you really want to know more, take my class next semester. I swear it'll be good. It'll be fun. And thank you for having me.